I will announce our next speakers. Biren Van Herck, co-founder and chief digital officer of ProLines. He's an industrial engineer with an executive master in supply chain management. Needless to say, an urge to develop, improve, and implement complex systems is now second nature to him. Make the invisible visible. Please start the video.
Humans are visual creatures. Science has proven this time and time again. For instance, by showing how visualizing information in a humanly intuitive way can change the way we behave. Whether it be by translating negative language use in order to improve collaborative behavior, or gathering evidence that ambient displays not only provide us with factual information, but can actually encourage people to change their behavior for the better.
But that's all theory and experiments, best left to the Einsteins and the Freuds of this world. What is in fact relevant for us here today is the science behind human behavior and visualization. Our eyes rule our brain. How can this knowledge about behavior and visuality be translated into the reality of business? How can it be translated into a tangible product that leads to optimal efficiency? Meet the ambient energy orb. Created at MIT, it is based on the principle of persuasive ambient visualization. Now, before you go running for the hills or nearest bar, let me assure you, the ridiculously smart people over at MIT have dumbed the data science part down for us into the simple language of a traffic light. Red, orange, green. And it all boils down to this. By translating utility companies' daily pricing pattern into a simple color code, the consumers are able to adjust their behavior based on real-time information. So when the orb shines red, the consumers are made aware that the energy prices at that point in time are at the peak, and energy consumption should be kept to a minimum. When it shines orange, the prices are average, but a lower energy consumption is still advised. And finally, a green light means the energy prices at that point in time are at their lowest. So the perfect moment to do the laundry or to turn on the dishwasher. In other, simpler words, red, stop, orange, wait, green, hammer time. And the results are quite spectacular. Now let me tell you about a pilot project with Baltimore Gas and Electric, where this orb has been used in 1,200 homes across the greater Baltimore area. And it showed an impressive average of 25% decrease in energy consumption over the course of a year, while the company itself was able to curb peak energy demands and increase overall customer satisfaction quite significantly. So, what does this energy-saving, eco-friendly orb has to do with this DIY summit with no Al Gore or Greenpeace inside? Just as the ambient orb provided drastic cuts in energy consumption through consumer awareness, so too can our DIY sector move from a red to an orange and finally an optimal green light in the way retailers and suppliers work together. The greatest value of a picture is when it forces us to notice what we never expected to see. This brings us to the how. Data visualization, or make the invisible visible. Still sounds kind of abstract, right? Okay, let's bring it down to the real world, our supply chain world. And this is my friend, John. John?
Hello.
is the supply chain director of a big DIY retailer. And John's a nice guy, great at his job, good to his personnel. But he's frustrated. The profit margins are under pressure, and the higher-ups need action, quick. So John's at the crossroads. Does he cut costs the old-fashioned way by laying off shop personnel? Or does he live for the next 6 months behind his desk to streamline a data set that will be out of date by the time he's finished? John considers the first option. But he's aware of the service level issues at the shops. And what do you do if the company is already operating at the bare minimum amount of employees needed to steer the ship into the right direction? Instead, he wants to find a way to maximize their capacity. So he decides to turn back and embark upon the slow and painful journey of sifting through the raw data to get a full picture of the current state of his supply chain. Maybe he'll have more luck this time. Alas, the information he gathers lacks any uniformity, contains numerous duplicates, and sometimes even flat-out wrong data. In order for him to get any valid results, he needs to sift through hours and hours and hours of data. Poor John. You and I know that cleaning up this data will take up a lot of his time and resources. And we all know that pain. So I'm quickly going to borrow the traffic light metaphor from our energy-friendly orb and say that this situation calls for a red light for our supply chain director. A bit disheartened by both prospects, John decides to head down to his favorite bar to seek some liquid courage, another tried and tested technique that some of us here might be familiar with. But lo and behold, before he gets a chance to drown his sorrows, he runs into two fellas who just happen to be there and just happen to work in supply chain too. And their company revolves around an entire software built for John's current predicament. Not only does it clean all data into one streamlined set, but its algorithm also reveals the most cost-effective and work-efficient opportunities to streamline the supply chain. Was it destiny that brought them together? Or sheer coincidence? Was this their plan all along, ever since the day they flirted with John's secretary to get an insight into John's schedule? I guess we'll never know. So, John doesn't want to waste any time and quickly heads back to the office. At the office, he subscribes onto the platform and starts uploading all of his raw data, no matter its correctness. John says a Hail Mary and gives the data cleaning path another go. And so it begins. Having cleaned all of his data through the software, John has now all the required information at his fingertips in real time. And he starts by analyzing the inbound flows of all the shops. First, he looks at inbound patterns, which is the accumulated week view of all the deliveries over a certain period of time. And he notices that not all the shops have a similar pattern. So he looks at the shops with the strongest peaks and troughs in their deliveries. So we have locations with a low amount of deliveries on Monday, but high on Friday. Other locations with the opposite pattern. We have locations with a high amount of deliveries on Monday and Friday, but a lull on Wednesday. And finally, locations with that opposite pattern. John sets off the data analysis with a rule of thumb to focus on the shops with the most potential. Meaning, a shop will be selected when the day with the lowest amount of receptions is 3 times smaller than the day with the highest amount. Why, you ask? Because John's brilliant, and he knows that all the deliveries on the day with the lowest amount of receptions could be redistributed onto the other days. And John's rule of thumb applies to 100 jobs, meaning that in the selected 100 jobs, the reception could be closed for an entire day all year long. And as for John, he can already hear his praises being sung by everyone. John, stay with us, John. You're not quite there yet. So, back to how John goes on to create this huge saving potential. As each job is different, he wants to take a closer look at the first job on the list with a low amount of deliveries on Thursdays. And he wants to include the fixed delivery schedules to see how many commitments have been made to their suppliers. And his data tells him that only 3 suppliers should actually be delivering on this day, meaning that all other suppliers delivered either too early, too late, or don't have a fixed delivery day at all. If John can agree with these 3 suppliers to change their delivery day to, for instance, Friday, he can close the store's reception. As for the suppliers delivering either too early or too late, they should deliver on the agreed upon day. And the suppliers without a fixed delivery day, they can deliver on any other day of the week. Instead of making them an offer they can't refuse, John will now make them an offer they don't want to refuse. And he knows where to find them, as all the suppliers are on the Pro Alliance platform he's been using. So without losing any time, he starts a chat session with all the suppliers in question. And they all agree to change their day. And why would they all agree to this? Because they're afraid of John's inner mobster? No, because it cut costs on both sides, retailers and suppliers, and makes it even possible for suppliers to improve their service level by seizing collaborative opportunities. But more on that later. Let's now keep our focus on our favorite supply chain director, who is now busy posting all the agreed upon changes to the community wall for everyone to read, saving him time he'd otherwise spent on mailing or calling everyone on the need-to-know list. John keeps his eye on the prize and repeats this process for the other 99 selected stores. He can now easily delegate this task by involving all levels of supply chain in the process: suppliers, logistics, and personnel, making each party share in their respective responsibilities and workload. So now opportunities can quickly be spotted, and unrefusable offers can be made by everyone involved. The platform was built on 3 tiers that make for an effortless transition of tasks from one person to the next. Its interface is easy to understand, rewarding with a minimum of effort, thanks to the algorithm taking up much of the workload. And thirdly, intuitive, as in using the same recognizable technology you use in everyday life. Can you imagine how happy John is right now? But he can still hear the call for supply chain perfection, keeping him up at night. He has moved up to the average orange light, but knows he can get up to the green. There must be even more that can be accomplished with all this data begging to be used. What about all his suppliers? What can they get out of this data to optimize their service too? And John's midnight musings about the supplier side of things are not entirely selfless. He knows that optimization on all sides of the supply chain would be a win-win for everyone involved. What a strategist, that good old John. And yes, there is something more hidden in the software, just for suppliers. And it has a real cool name too. The Streamliner. Well, At least John's super impressed. On the streamliner, suppliers get a visual overview of their fixed delivery schedule, so they can look for opportunities to pack together as many shipments as possible. It shows where each supplier is delivering from, to who they deliver, how many pallets they deliver, and how often they deliver. And here we see there is an immediate match between 10% of all the different shipment lanes, which is great, but we can do better. The software visualizes literally all the different parameters imaginable that could streamline the deliveries. So you can filter out and cluster based on time frame, on geographical vicinity, on transport hubs, and transport characteristics. And it will automatically show you if you've optimized your deliveries. And the resulting changes of a few clicks on this dataset are rather impressive. All deliveries can go into a single truck. The total amount of kilometers driven have been cut in half, and with that, the carbon dioxide emissions. And we see there's a 100% match between all the different shipment lanes. Whoa, is it just me, or has John just brokered peace in the entire supply chain kingdom? Speaking of John, where is he? Look at him go, efficiently communicating with all of his store managers, company suppliers, and any other stakeholder, thanks to the platform's intuitive visualizations, tackling his wildest supply chain dreams and overcoming all past obstacles. Just as the science behind the orb, the ProLines algorithm supplied John with essential, real-time information and a data filtering system that cleaned and visualized all the information he needed to make a supply chain more cost-effective and work efficient. John is now operating on a green light, simply by making his invisible data visible. The same way energy consumers cut back on their energy spending based on a simple tricolor visualization. And these are the real-life pioneers and influencers behind the ProLines platform, and on which we have based John's story. They provided invaluable feedback and support in its early days and helped to shape it into the software it is today. I would like to round things off by quickly translating John's efforts into numbers and figures, and show you how easy it was for John to set up his own community. He created his community in less than half an hour and invited all of his trading partners to join. Within this community, large amounts of data were crowdsourced, while our technology cleaned and visualized all the information he needed. New ideas and opportunities were discovered and shared when playing with the various visualizations, leading to huge cost savings. But how about those numbers and figures? John saved up to 80% of time compared to the manual process of collecting, cleaning, and visualizing his data. Because all suppliers contributed to their share of data input, John has now access to 50% more information. The improved data quality and visibility enabled John and his suppliers to identify the opportunity to close down the store's reception for 1.5 days a week. And the current estimate of this decision brings us to a saving of approximately €2 million annually. 2 million, simply by having a full picture of his inbound data. And how about the suppliers? What do they gain by joining John's community? Real-time visibility of their outbound, access to performance reporting of their logistics service provider, a common dashboard together with John that will help them in their weekly monthly or yearly business reviews. And on top of that, the Streamliner presented them with numerous advantages and opportunities, and increased visibility enabled them to identify huge collaborative opportunities. And finally, we have an additional, widely welcomed effect that made the tree hugger inside John, but all of us at ProLines too actually, exceedingly happy. By optimizing the way deliveries are scheduled, the total amount of kilometers driven to and from retailer locations by suppliers were reduced by 60%, which would also cut down traffic congestion quite significantly. And anyone living in or near a city knows that their blood pressure or the use of swear words during rush hour would probably decrease by a similar amount. Greenhouse gas emissions attributed by the transport in our sector would also go down. So our sector wouldn't just become green in the traffic light metaphor sense of the word, but in the actual green ecological sense too. So what do these results mean for you? There are over 9,000 large retailers and more than 10 million suppliers currently working next to each other. What if a large bulk of these start working with each other, having access to currently untapped data through a shared, transparent network that is both non-disruptive and leads to long-term change? It would exponentially scale the effects obtained by John in its pilot project, and retailers and suppliers across the spectrum would noticeably see their costs drop. I hope this presentation of John's journey together with us at ProLines has been enlightening, because the invisible is now visible. I hope it will give you food for thought about how and why investing in increased data visibility of your supply chain can lead to a better and new way forward. Because the reality of today is that we cannot afford to think in silos anymore, and nor should we. We, as an entire business sector, can make a real, tangible difference that will transcend our business and have a positive effect on people's daily lives. Just like the people at MIT started with a complex problem, but ended up with a very simple solution, so do we at ProLines offer you a simple solution, accessible to everyone, and makes a real difference for your supply chain. The invisible is now visible, and it can change the way we behave and interact for the better. The time is now. We have the tools, we have the know-how, and we have no more excuses. And finally, there are 3 things I would like you to do for me. 1, this is me, and this is my contact information. Make sure you write it down. 2, find a John in your company and make sure he or she contacts me. And 3, talk to us here at the summit and discover what we can do for you. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure to be here. You are an amazing audience, and if you're having problems finding our booth, I'll be the nerd holding this balloon. Thank you.
Thank you, Biren. Wonderful presentation now to make the future much more visible.